So if your child is craving sugar, that's actually a sign that Candida might be at play. And the more sugar that you eat, the more sugar you need to feed that Candida. And so that Candida will continue to grow and grow. Welcome to the Soaring Child podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Hello, parents, and welcome back to another edition of the Soaring Child podcast. I'm your host, Dana Kay, and today we're diving into a topic that might surprise you. Have you ever heard of Candida? It's a type of yeast that lives in our bodies, but when it gets out of control, it can cause a whole host of problems, especially for our kiddos with ADHD. Now, you might be wondering, what does a little yeast have to do with ADHD? Well, Candida can create a lot of chaos in the body, from digestive issues to brain fog, which really is inattention, and even mood swings. It's an underlying stressor that often goes unnoticed. But don't worry, we're going to break it down for you today on the Soaring Child podcast. And in this episode, we're going to explore how Candida overgrowth happens. We're going to look at the symptoms that you want to be looking out for. And most importantly, what you can do as parents to help your child if this sneaky culprit is causing trouble. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's uncover the mystery of Candida together. So you're not going to want to miss this. It could be a game changer for your family's health journey. I would say that probably maybe about 60% of the families that I work with, we detect this on functional lab testing. So I just want to share this information with you in case it might be affecting your child too. Now, before we dive in, I want to introduce myself to any of you who might be tuning into the podcast for the first time. Welcome, welcome, welcome if that's you. Like I said, my name is Dana Kay. I'm a board certified health and nutrition practitioner, and I work with families all across the country, and I help them reduce those symptoms that are really debilitating their child's life and their family lives. These symptoms are stopping their kiddos from being the best versions of themselves, from being able to learn like their peers, and also creating chaos in their family life. No one needs to be suffering out there with ADHD. I have been where you are, and I've been in those depths of that chaos. So I know exactly what you guys are going through. And that's why I'm so excited to be jumping on here today, just by myself, all on my lonesome, no one to have a conversation with, but hopefully I can offer you guys the same hope that this year can be better. You know, things can be different. It doesn't have to be like it's always been. Now, firstly, I'd like to say no information in this episode should be relied upon to make a medical diagnosis, to treat, to prevent, or cure any disease or any medical condition. So I want to ask you, if you're listening, do any of these symptoms sound familiar for your child? Mood disorders, so things like anxiety, irritability, depression. What about brain fog or inability to focus or concentrate? Food cravings, things like sugar, carbohydrates. Are they suffering from gas, bloating, or abdominal pain? Now, if they are suffering from any of these, it may be Candida. So as I mentioned earlier, it's a normal organism present in the digestive tract, and it's a type of yeast that is part of the commensal flora, okay? You know, it's part of that normal flora that's going on in our guts, and it is typically kept in check by our immune system and the rest of the microflora. However, Candida is opportunistic. And what that means is that given the chance, any chance possible, it's going to overgrow and it's going to cause numerous symptoms. So, I'm going to dive into some common symptoms of Candida. Now, I want you to listen to this list. Some of them I've mentioned just before, but there are plenty others that come with it. Fatigue. We talked about those mood disorders. We talked about the brain fog or inability to focus, ear and throat infections, gas, bloating, abdominal pain, diarrhea or constipation, thrush, nausea, fungal infections, so in the nails or the skin, like the athlete's foot, even white coating on the tongue. Has your kiddo got a nasal congestion or that postnasal drip? Is there vaginal itching or burning? Headaches or migraines, skin conditions, so itching, rashes, eczema, psoriasis. What about food or chemical sensitivities, food cravings, like I mentioned earlier, joint pain or muscle aches, asthma or hay fever, sinusitis or chronic sinus infections, or weight gain and loss? Okay, there's a lot of symptoms there. You don't need to be suffering from all of them to be experiencing yeast or candida overgrowth. Now, before we sort of dive in a little bit deeper, I want to talk a little bit about what causes that candida or that yeast overgrowth. So when candida overgrows, it is a sign that something else in the body is going on because, as I mentioned, candida is opportunistic. So it's going to grow out of balance if your health has been weakened. And anything that can disrupt the immune system or the gut microflora will create the opportunity for candida to overgrow. So when we take a lot of antibiotics, they wipe out that good bacteria in the gut, which really helps keep candida levels under control. So that good bacteria keeps those candida levels under control. Candida is often secondary to other infections in the gut. So things like parasites. You must address these first to bring candida under control. There's like this hierarchy of bug guts. We've got those parasites, and those parasites feed on bacteria, and that bacteria feeds on yeast. So you've got to go up the chain to get rid of those things up the chain so you can then get rid of the candida. Next up is a high sugar diet. Sugar feeds candida. So if your child is craving sugar, that's actually a sign that candida might be at play. And the more sugar that you eat, the more sugar you need to feed that candida. And so that candida will continue to grow and grow. Next up is heavy metal toxicity. Look, the body sometimes uses candida as kind of this like protective mechanism against the harmful effects of mercury toxicity. So if you want to remove the source of mercury exposure, like dental amalgams, that will help the cause. Birth control pills, oral contraceptives imbalance gut flora. Stress and lifestyle factors, anything that weakens the immune system, too much stress, lack of sleep, poor diet, alcohol will give candida an opportunity to overgrow. So while alcohol is probably not the cause of the candida for your child, you never know. If you're suffering from candida, it could be from that as well. Next up is EMF exposure. Electromagnetic frequencies are known to trigger candida. So this would include things like cell phones, Wi-Fi, smart meters, and so on. Okay, so I just want to touch a little bit further on, the sugar side of things. Why does candida cause brain fog and sugar cravings? Super important to tackle that. Candida causes numerous brain-related symptoms that are similar to symptoms of a hangover, that brain fog, headaches, nausea, fatigue, because both candida overgrowth and alcohol metabolism produce high levels of toxin called acetaldehyde. Candida loves sugar, okay? Because sugar is candida's primary source of food, it will actually make you crave it so that it can get more and more food. Okay, so you've got some information now. You're thinking maybe candida might be at play. But how do we identify it? How do we know really if our kiddos are suffering from candida overgrowth? There are a couple of simple things that you can actually do at home to identify if candida may be at play. The first one that I want to talk about is the candida spit test. What you want to do is you want to fill a clear glass with water. And you want to place it by your bed at nighttime. When you first wake up in the morning, you do your big stretch, you work up a bit of saliva in your mouth, and you can spit that right into that glass. Do not use throat clearings, okay? It is important that nothing enters the mouth or touches your lips before you do this. So don't drink any water. You don't want to eat any foods. Do not brush your teeth or kiss your partner prior to expressing that saliva into the glass. Now, immediately once you've done that, make note of how the saliva looks. Check it again every few minutes, and you want to observe any changes that occur within a 15-minute time frame. Okay, so you get the glass, you work up your saliva, you spit it into the glass, and you observe the changes over a 15-minute time frame. Healthy saliva will be clear. It will float on the top and it will slowly dissolve into the water without any cloudiness and without sinking. There are normally some bubbles or foam present. Candida saliva, on the other hand, will have one or more characteristics that may be a clue that Candida albicans have overgrown. So what happens is these strings travel down towards the bottom of the glass. Okay, that's one of those clues. Cloudy saliva that sinks to the bottom of the glass, or cloudy specks suspended in the water. These are a sign that Candida albicans may have overgrown. Now, with that, you want to take that Candida self-assessment. Now, I'm going to put a link to that in the show notes. This Candida self-screening questionnaire was actually designed by William G. Crook, MD, to be used for children to identify any predisposition to Candida yeast overgrowth. Now, it's not intended, as I said earlier, as a means for diagnosis, but rather an additional method for gathering information. And the results should be used in conjunction with the Candida spit test that I just mentioned. And you should get the help of your holistic health practitioner to really evaluate the role Candida albicans may be contributing to your child's health problems. So as I mentioned, I'm going to drop a link in the show notes to that self-assessment. And so if you suspect that Candida may be at play for your child, then definitely speak to your practitioner to investigate further functional lab tests and then develop a personalized health plan for your child. Yes, I mentioned functional lab tests, so let's just dive into that for a little bit. There are special tests that can be used to investigate whether Candida is at play. And one of those is a stool test, and one of them is an organic acid test. I'm going to talk about what each of them are now. So this at-home spit test, and the form that you've got there can act as maybe we need to dive deeper into further testing. The first up is a stool test. This first test we encourage clients to do is a stool sample that basically looks at the state of the gut. So you can see that whether or not Candida or yeast is overgrown. You can see other things like parasites or bacteria or worms. There are also some really good intestinal health markers that look at inflammation, immune system responses, leaky gut, digestive enzymes, and are you digesting your fat well? I will say the stool test you get from your pediatrician usually won't pick these things up, and the ones you can buy online tend to not be that great either. So make sure you choose the right one, working with a qualified health practitioner. Next up is an organic acid test, or you might know it as an OATS test, OATS, and it also identifies Candida. But I love this test probably the most because it actually looks at 70 different important markers in the whole body and how it's functioning. So yes, it's going to show you whether or not Candida is at play, but it's also going to look at so much more. It's going to look at the need for specific nutrients like B vitamins, which are really important for our compromised kids. Diet modification, so things like salicylates and oxalates, which are chemical compounds found in the most healthy foods. It's going to look at your detoxification pathways, neurotransmitters like serotonin. dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine. It's going to look at oxidative stress, mitochondrial function, which are, bigger topics that we're probably not going to dive into today. But it's also going to look at mold toxicity, plus other important markers as well. So those are the 2 tests that you can do once you may have identified if Candida is at play. So you're probably thinking, okay, I've got this information. What do I do with it? Well, now I'm going to talk about how to combat Candida if that is at play. Firstly, we want to look at the anti-yeast diet, and it should be followed for a minimum of 6 to 8 foods. I'm going to just name a couple. So you want to limit or avoid gluten, which we avoid anyway, don't we, listeners? Yes, because we know that that's the top inflammatory food for our kiddos with ADHD. Grains, non-organic animal protein, sugar. Sugar, definitely not. We want to take that out or avoid it or greatly limit it because it feeds the Candida. Legumes, beans, alcohol, fermented foods, mushrooms or fungi, fruit juice, most fruit, and root vegetables. Now, I will say, generally, when I'm working with kiddos that have got Candida, I generally don't put them on an anti-Candida diet. And the reason being is we're already taking out, gluten and dairy, and we're reducing the amount of sugar already. So we're already starting to do some really good stuff that's going to help with that Candida. We don't limit it even more because I find that with kiddos, they can adapt really, really easy to the changes we're making. And then we can bring in some specific supplements to target that yeast. And rarely do we actually need to take it further with diet. Adults, is a slightly different story because theirs is usually much more invasive because yeast does attach to the intestinal wall. We need to get a little bit deeper in there, really implement that anti-yeast diet and supplements as well. Now, I want to say a big thing that yeast feeds on is sugar. Okay. So fruit juice, sugar really should be, kept to a minimum. The next approach is to bring in a range of supplements focused to target the yeast while following the anti-Candida diet or, the diet that I mainly talk about. So we want to consider supplements like probiotics and something called Saccharomyces boulardii. This is a beneficial yeast that actually helps remove unhealthy yeast from the body. Next up, we want to use natural antifungals. These can really mop up and kill off any of those nasties in the gut. The one that I love the most is called biocidin. You need to be careful with doing biocidin on your own. You want to bring in a binder. A binder will help bind out all the die-off that is from that biocidin that it's killing all that yeast and Candida. Next up is molybdenum or milk thistle. These can really be beneficial as they assist the liver in breaking down the offshoots from that Candida and removing it from the body. Another option is medical antifungals. If all else fails, you can seek doctors' help and they may prescribe a pharmaceutical medical antifungal such as diflucan or nystatin. But you must seek doctors' advice, and a lot of the time they're kind of like this nuclear bomb, and they do more harm than good. So if you can take a more natural approach, it is very, very beneficial and you can overcome it. But if you've got really, really invasive Candida, that pharmaceutical route may be applicable. Okay, now I know that was a lot of information. So I just want to summarize what we covered today. Okay. Candida may be contributing to some of our children's ADHD, anxiety, focus issues, symptoms, things like that. Anything that disrupts the immune system or the microflora in the gut will create the opportunity Candida needs to thrive. You can identify Candida through an at-home assessment, through a spit test and that checklist, or a gut test or an organic acid test. You can target that Candida through diet, healing supplements, or as a last resort, pharmaceutical medications under the supervision of your doctor. So now, if you suspect Candida might be at play for your child and contributing to their symptoms and are looking for answers for your child's ADHD, and you're ready to sort of take that leap and start fighting their symptoms naturally, what I'm going to also do is I'm going to pop a link into the show notes that you can click to schedule a free call with me and my team. We will speak with you personally about how we can support you so that you can really help your child thrive. You can target that candida. You can get back that calm into your house, sometimes in as little as 6 to 8 weeks. Well, that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning into the Soaring Child podcast. I hope you found today's deep dive into Candida and its potential impact on ADHD symptoms both informative and empowering. Now, remember, if you do suspect Candida might be at play for your child and want to explore natural strategies to reduce ADHD symptoms, I really encourage you to take that next step. There is hope for you and there is hope for your child. Click the link in the show notes to schedule a free call with me and my team. We're here to support you and really bring back that calm and balance into your home. Thank you once again for joining us today. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a review, or even share it with other families who might benefit from this information. Together as a community, we can make a difference in our children's lives. I'm Dana Kate, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at adhdthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.